Welcome back to the Terminal Exchange, the official podcast of Nussbaum Transportation, where we explore key issues and compelling stories in the trucking industry. I'm your host, Dayton Rumbold, and you're listening to episode 117, Hope to the Highways, an exclusive interview with our CEO, Brent Nussbaum, and founder of the Mariah Foundation, Brent Hansen. Have you ever wondered about the stories behind the trailers? Today we sit down with Brent Nussbaum as he continues the story of how he helped turn the business into a ministry, and how through becoming friends with counselor Brent Hansen, they produced the messaging you see today. This is a long episode, so make sure to stay tuned to the end to hear the stories behind each of the graphics. And now, our featured exchange. I've got Brent and Brent in the studio with me today, so thank you for being here.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Yeah, my pleasure.
Yeah, Brent squared. I'm not sure
I like that.
what to call, how to differentiate. But Brent Nussbaum, our CEO, and Brent Hansen.
Yes.
Okay. And the founder of the Mariah Foundation.
Correct.
Okay, great. Any other titles?
No, that's good enough.
Not a fan of big titles.
I'm there and I do what God's called me to. You kind of know how that is, right, Brent?
It's a good way to put that.
Yeah. Every day is different.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, if you could you share like a 2 or 3 sentence overview? And Brent, I mean, we know you, but if you also want to share a little bit maybe about your family, 2 or 3 sentences just for people listening to get a general idea of who you are.
You're talking about my wife and kids?
Yes, yeah,
Okay,
exactly.
very
Your
good.
family and
Yeah, and I'm married, been married for 40 years, just this last year, and got 5 kids, all the ranging from 38 years old, or almost 38, all the way down to 17. So my wife and I have 4 girls and 1 boy and 4 grandkids. They don't live close enough to us, but hey, that's okay. We'll take it.
Okay.
So
Yeah, that's very cool. And you have a Olympic diver in your family too, I found out.
we do.
At one point.
We've got a son-in-law that was spent most of his life diving as a platform diver, and went to Purdue and was had quite a bit of success there. And then he and his partner went on down to Rio to the Olympics back 4 or 5 years ago, and won a silver in 10-meter diving.
Wow.
Which why anybody would want to dive from that height is beyond me, but I'm glad somebody does.
Yeah,
So,
that's something I would never know. And we were talking on driving to a conference, and I found that out. I was like, wow, I would never know that. That's interesting. What about you, Brent?
Been married, it'll be 35 years this summer. I have 3 children, and they range from 25 actually, to 17, going to be 18. You set the high standard there. Remember all those things. One is married, and she lives in another state, and have 1 more child to get through high school, and then he'll be on to college as well.
Okay.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, yeah, thank you again for being here. Today we're talking about how the graphics and how the messaging of Nussbaum on our trailers, how that happened, and how you played a role in that, Brent Hansen. I think that's how I'll say it, Mr. Hansen. So for our icebreaker question, what is something on your bucket list that you have not done yet? Something that you really wanted to check off and that you haven't been able to do?
when all you've known is work your entire life, it's a little hard to have a bucket list. You know, I'm just, at this point, this is going to take you a whole different direction.
Sure,
I'm just thrilled
that's okay.
that all of our kids know who Jesus is, have a relationship with him, and are following him. And I think if I can get through life and leave them with a legacy that matters, you know, and that would be it. So
Yeah.
that is my, I wouldn't call it my bucket list, but it should be at the top of it.
A life goal?
Yeah, a life goal, yep.
And that's true. My grandpa, he passed away from colon cancer maybe over 20 years ago, but I still hear stories about him to this day, and I find strength from that, like to be able to hear those stories of who they were because they left a legacy.
Right.
And that's a great thing to work for.
Yep.
Yeah, I think that's really cool. Yeah.
Thanks.
Brent Hansen?
Well, I think legacy is a great word. When you talk about bucket lists, it's obviously the things you want to get done before you pass on and over, and you want to live a life that has meaning, and hopefully it's good meaning, right? And most of that meaning is going to pass into your children, the next generation, and then hopefully you've set a good example that they'll pick up and heal from the ways you made mistakes, as a parent, such. And I think in terms of a bucket list, we just like as a family to do things together. Even now with a child outside of the state, we're going to all meet up soon and go to Branson together and see some shows, do some meals, and building into that legacy that way. So maybe the bucket list is do a West Coast tour and see the redwoods or something like that,
Yeah.
But to do it as a family, somehow figure out how you can get the whole family to do it together.
Yeah, that's cool.
Yep.
Just getting the family there together.
Well, it is hard.
Yes.
We've got 5 kids. We've got 1 in Nashville and 2 in California. So it's it is challenging.
It's quite the stretch.
But just hey, if you can't be there, FaceTime will at least helps.
That's right.
Yeah.
So you can still see them and know they're still smiling, and
So this is really a part 2 to the episode that Brad Formsma did with Brent. So if you haven't listened to that, the Wow Factor podcast, Brent talked to Brad Formsma from the Wow Factor, and he talked a lot about how being the leader, CEO, Nussbaum, how he got into that position. And today we're going to pick up in that story when you came back from doing school later in the 1990, right about that time.
Long time ago.
Long time ago. So.
Well,
So if Brent, if you could share about that time and returning from school and coming back to Nussbaum, and if you could tell me a little bit about what that looked like and the journey there.
Well, in the earlier podcast, we talked about the fact that when I went back to school, my idea was not to come back to the trucking business. I had no desire, and the reason for that was that it was a unionized LTL/trucking truckload trucking business, and I was just really burnt out on it at the time. So God opened up the door for me to go back to school, and I did a degree, a bachelor's degree in international business and business management at ISU, and then went to Arizona and ended up getting a master's degree in international business there. And then I searched, so I'm like, okay, Lord, so we're done with this. Where am I to go? Here I was. I had gone back later in life, so I was 40 years old, and I had no idea where I was headed. And so my wife and I started praying about, okay, well, Lord, if I don't have a direction as far as a business, give me a direction on where to start a job search. So interestingly enough, I would have never necessarily chose it for myself, but we had this sense that we were to be in Indianapolis, and started praying about starting a job search there. It would have been 2 hours from my wife's family and another almost 3 from my family, so at least it allowed our kids to, would have allowed our kids to see their relatives or their cousins. And
sorry,
go ahead
to interrupt too. So even before this, so you're trying to figure out where should I go, what should I do, and before that, we wanted to start your own business too. Is that right? And you tried to do this venture.
Yeah.
Okay.
Before I ever went back to school, I left the company business and went off to start my own business. and failed drastically. I mean, really failed, and it was good because I needed to see that I needed more education. So that's why I ended up leaving and going back. I was in bed one night sleeping after that failure, and I'm like, Lord, what do I do? You know, and I had a clear sense of direction that I was supposed to go back to school.
Okay.
So that's what I did, and that's
Yeah.
how I ended up
Yeah.
back in school.
That's good.
And it was a good time to be back at school. I was a much better student at 34 years old than I would have ever been at 18.
Yeah.
Every semester, every class was a new adventure. And every class I took, I just really, really enjoyed. And so when I got out and we were doing this search, you know, you'd have thought that I'd have had a little bit more direction at the time. Fortunately, God did, but I didn't. And so we ended up doing that job search in Indianapolis. And as I was doing that job search, it seemed like doors everywhere were just closing. And it was just really hard to get anyone's attention for somebody who had been in the trucking business for, 15, 17 years. And here I was fresh out of school with a master's degree. And not that I thought that I would, get something immediately, but it just didn't happen. And ended up, interestingly enough, with a small business that sold digital color inkjet printers that were made in Israel. And they only sold one brand. And they had the marketing for all of the U.S. and Canada. And as I was talking to these folks, I'm like, well, okay, if this is the direction I'm to head, then I'm willing to head there. So I took a job with these folks, and they were an interesting company to work for. Very unethical. Extremely unethical, as a matter of fact.
And you probably loved that, right? That was...
Oh, yeah. It was a blast. Every day I went in with just like, Lord, how in the world did I end up at this company?
Wow. And you were the vice president?
I was the VP of marketing for this company.
VP of marketing.
So I had way more title than my responsibilities called for.
Sure.
But I think that they did that so they could get me to come.
Yeah.
And so, armed with a title, I was in charge of marketing their services within the U.S. and Canada. So they sold large format digital color inkjet printers that printed trailer graphics, billboard signs. They were massive printers at that time. They were $500,000 a piece. The printers were. And so we sold them to print shops that did large format graphics, and the one of the attractions for me was I had knowledge of trucking companies, and they wanted to sell to more printers that would sell truck graphics.
Sure.
And so I learned a lot about truck graphics and learned about the materials that were used. There were, at that time, there were framing systems you could put on the side of a trailer that you could change graphics out more often, like for seasonal or regional type promotions.
So same trailer but different graphic. You can
right.
Just
you
change
could
it.
you could just open up the framing system and take the old graphic out. Most trailer graphics today are put on with a 3M graphic or a 3M substrate that just sticks onto the side of the trailer.
Okay.
And when you get done, hopefully they pull off real easy.
Sure.
Generally with heat.
Yeah.
So anyway, I got to experience that, and as we were going along, they wanted me to start a new division for them, focusing just strictly on truck graphics. And I really didn't want to be with this company very long because it was just, without going into a lot of detail, it was just not fun working for them.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, not a good fit.
Yeah, not a good fit. So my wife and I started praying about where what I was supposed to do.
Yeah, but it's amazing to see that seed be planted
Right.
early on, and then we're going to talk about this and how Brent H. he gets involved in this, and
Yeah,
that seed's planted.
at the time I had no idea, what God had in store with this, but it was really cool as to how it eventually worked into what we're doing today. And so as we were praying about it, they had told me, they said, well, one of these days we're going to come to you and say, today's the day, and you need to start this new venture within our company, and you need to give your current marketing duties to this other person. And so, I was like, come on, Lord, you got to give me some direction here, because what I didn't want to do is I didn't want to start this business or this new division for him and then leave.
Yeah,
I just really didn't.
makes sense.
Yeah, so we had been praying. My wife had always felt like I was supposed to return to the trucking business, but I was pretty sure that I wasn't supposed to return to it. That was my plan, right? And so she was praying for God to soften my heart, and I was praying for direction, anywhere away from it. And one morning we got up, and I told Cheryl, I said, I think I'm going to be really surprised if sometime this week, if they don't come in and say, today is the day. And I said, man, I need some direction. And by that time, I had become willing to at least entertain the idea of making a return to the trucking company. I didn't want to, but I had no other direction at that particular time. And so we prayed and went off. I went off to work, and 9 o'clock that morning, I'm sitting in my office, and I said, Lord, if you want me to return, you're going to have to make it really evident to me, because I said I just didn't have any direction at all.
It's going to have to be a huge sign.
And it's going to have to be, I didn't pray for a huge sign. I just said it's going to have to be really evident. And within 5 seconds of praying that prayer, one of our trucks came by the front window of that building, and I'm like, no way, no way. And within 30 minutes, my boss shows up, and he said, hey, today's the day. He and the owner of the company, they said, we need you to put your marketing duties over to this person over here, and we need you to, take off with this other division and get it started. And I just kind of looked at him, and I thought, boy, you have no idea what just took place. So anyway, I went home, and nobody in my family knew anything about my return. Mind you, now this is back in this would have been in 96.
Okay.
And my dad had passed away in 79, so he had been gone a while.
Yeah.
My mother wasn't running the company, but she kind of oversaw the general manager that was running the company at the time. So I didn't quite have the courage to call her immediately.
Sure.
So I enlisted one of my sisters, and I said, there was a contingent of people coming in from Israel the next day, and I was supposed to be part of those meetings. So,
well, Brent, can I ask, why
Sure.
weren't you super excited to come back to the company?
it was the same company I'd left, and there was a lot of legacy stuff being a unionized company, and a lot of good employees that were here, but I just couldn't see the future other than the way it was when I had left. And so that was a struggle for me. And I didn't want to be a part of that. So that is
the future of where it was going wasn't what you
wanted. The only thing that had happened is while I was gone, while I was in school, the management that was in place had started another non-union business, another trucking company that was non-union, but it was very small at the particular time, and I wasn't real fond of, I wanted to do something different. I really wanted to do something away from trucking altogether.
Sure.
So I enlisted, going back to that story, I enlisted one of my sisters to begin praying for me. And I said, if this is supposed to be, then I said, I think I need to go in tomorrow morning and resign on the spot. And So she called me really early the next morning and said, hey, she said, I was up early. She said, I really felt like God gave me some scripture that said that you're to come back. And so I said, well, I'm feeling that same sense. So I ended up going in that morning and sharing with my boss what had taken place and that I'd put it into prayer. And he looked at me and he said, truck, huh? He said, that's pretty compelling evidence. Funny, because if you'd have known this guy, he was far from a believer.
That's not his.
Yeah. It was not a normal response from this guy.
Yeah.
So it took me about 4 days to tell my mom, what had taken place, and she was thrilled, and that I would consider a return. But yeah, and it took us a little bit of time to kind of figure out what I was going to be doing, but I did return to the company, and
yeah. So what position did you return into at that time? And
so I ended up going back as a VP of marketing, which again, marketing was my background. That's what I came out of school with, but I ended up doing some sales work on top of it initially over in the Indianapolis area, and then we eventually moved back to Bloomington. And I continued to do some special projects and sales up until about 99.
Okay, gotcha.
So,
and that's what I was curious. The role at Nussbaum when you came back, and that was sales and pricing.
Yeah, sales and marketing, actually.
Sales and marketing.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay. Good.
So that was fun. I mean, I really did enjoy the sales side of things, and the marketing was just a part of what I got to do. And,
a very natural expression. Like you want things to be seen and communicated, and you can tell by just looking around at the trailers we have today, but we haven't got there yet on how we got there. But
yeah, it was an interesting time. I returned to the same company I left, same people. The smaller non-union company was starting to grow and take off a little bit, but Nussbaum itself was it was tough. There was a lot of people with attitudes were not good. I mean, and I think part of that went back to they could see that the non-union company was starting to grow over here, but there was no attention being on the larger company, which was over here. And so it created some really hard feelings. It created some, they don't care about us, of the current management anyway. So I could see pretty quickly that needed to change. That was about a 99 or 98, 99.
Well, and I was just thinking with this transition and coming back to Nussbaum, the prayer that you spent in the transition from the company in Indianapolis to Nussbaum, that's not normal for most people probably to spend time in prayer considering for jobs, like what should I do? And so I think that's an important aspect too. And then I think also as we get into here of like this part of like ministry and also business, how does that work together? And so during this time, there was less attention to the truckload, like LTL, and was getting more attention.
The non-union company.
The non-union
was getting more
company.
attention.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that was part of the problem. The current management group, and I, if I look back today, on one side I can see why, but they had kind of given up hope on the mothership, and they were, working on this other company over here, and it really didn't give a lot of hope. It didn't give a lot of hope to the people, again, that were at Nussbaum Trucking. So when I came back, everybody was excited to see me back because I represented hope for that particular company.
Mm-hmm.
But it was very, very frustrating because the general manager at the time just was not spending any time on this.
There were two different visions of what the future was.
Yeah.
Okay.
We really needed a change in general managers.
Mm-hmm.
And we recognized that there were some things going on in that person's life that were not good,
Mm-hmm.
and trying to change that was just not in the cards for that person. They just did not want to change. So we determined that that person, through some prayer, that person needed to go. And my mother and I sat down and met with him. And we did something kind of unusual. On the way out, he asked to buy the non-union company.
Okay.
The unionized company was barely profitable. It was really struggling.
Yeah.
In a big way. And the non-union company was profitable, and it was nicely profitable. And generally, people don't sell their best asset
Right.
to someone else and keep their
The
worst
least
one.
profitable. Yeah.
Their least profitable
It's very
one.
abnormal.
Right. So he asked to do that, and I prayed about it, and I just sensed God telling me to let that company go.
Is that easy to come to that conclusion? Like, to hear if God's telling you this, was that something you were excited about, that you weren't excited about?
Well, I was more concerned about just really, here I was back at a company I really didn't want to be at. We were struggling with all this legacy stuff, and I had no idea. The only thing I knew of is that, okay, God, you're going to have to tell me what it needs to be done, and I got to trust you in a big way because this is not going well.
Mm-hmm.
And so we did. We sold that company to he and a few other investors, and they went off, and here I was with a company that, again, as I mentioned, still union, both divisions, and everybody's kind of looking at me going, now what are we going to do? And it was a challenging time.
Yeah, and so what time frame was this? We talked at 1996, around that time you came back, and then...
Yeah, it was 99 to 2000 is when I took that over, and we sold that other company off
Okay.
to those people.
So you're off on the company now. That's, you've sold out the LTL portion, and...
No, actually, we we recognized in 1999 that the LTL, as it was, small shipment company, which was actually 2/3 of our revenues, was the environment was changing in retail. So a lot of small businesses, mom and pop businesses that ordered in small quantities, they were going under, and all the big box stores, your Sam's Clubs, your Lowe's, your Walmarts, all of those people, Menards, they all bought in truckload quantities. And I saw that in late 99, and I said, man, we got to get out of this LTL business or it's just going to take the entire business. So we put our LTL division up for sale. It was 2/3 of our revenues, and it was unionized, but we ended up with an interested party within about a year's time. And so he and I worked through some details, and then finally, this was right before 2001. When 2001 came about, the economy started going the other direction. I mean, it started going south.
Yeah.
And he called me up and he said, I can't pull this off. He said, if I do, he said, I'm afraid it'll take us down, because it was a big purchase for them. So we went back on our knees to the drawing board and said, Lord, what do we do? And I went back to the Teamsters Union in October after 9/11 happened, and I said, guys, we can't survive in our current form without some changes to this Cadillac health plan we have and this Cadillac pension plan we have.
Right. So the pension is just a lot of money, and to keep that going.
And the health care. I mean, union pension and union health care were really expensive. And we said, I told him, I said, we don't want to touch wages, but I need a 401k and I need a copay on their health plan. And they looked at me and they said, we're not going to let the guys vote it. And I said, why not? And they said, because it would set a precedent for every other union company out there. So you just need to do whatever you want to do. And I said, you're not even going to let them vote it? And they said, nope. And so we had a lot of frustrated truck drivers. They wanted to vote it. And I think they would have voted to do that.
Yeah.
But the union wouldn't let them do it. So we said, well, in that case, we're going to enact the WARN Act notice, which is a 60-day warning that we're going to be out of business with our LTL division. And by the end of the year, we're going to shut that division down.
Yeah, and that's really difficult knowing that there's employees that's part of the difficult part, if I understand it correctly.
Really, really tough time. I mean, it was, it impacted others worse because they lost their jobs, but I will tell you that as a leader of a company, it's the last thing you ever want to do. And I will tell you that it had an extreme personal effect on me because, you don't ever want to look somebody in the eyes and after you put them out of a job. It's just not something you want to do. But if we had not done that, we wouldn't have survived.
We wouldn't be here today.
Yeah. So fortunately, a lot of our customers could have walked and they could have said, well, we're just going to quit using you right away. And we would have been in serious trouble because we would have had to cover all the salaries of our union drivers through the end of that year, that 60-day notice. But man, it was just a blessing. The vast majority of that business stayed with us all the way through that, all the way to the last day. And it allowed us to pay our people and to continue in operation during that particular time.
Yeah.
So it was really a testament to the, to loyalty to our company by these people.
Yeah. But a stressful time nonetheless.
Oh, very stressful.
Yeah.
Over 200 people lost their jobs, and we reorganized with a small truckload division, 77 drivers, 12 people in the office. Now we had to convince our customers that we're still a viable business.
Yeah, right. So 77 owner-operators and 12 people in the office.
Right.
Okay.
And a boatload of equipment to sell. So in a terminal we didn't need because we were no longer in the LTL business. So
Okay.
The next year we spent quite a bit of time selling off equipment, selling off facilities, reorganizing the business, and we were just trying to kind of, okay, Lord, we've got through that step. Now what?
What now?
Yeah.
Yeah. And this is where the story 2001 was a reshaping for the company, and it sounds like also for your personal life too, a little bit, maybe some reforming there was happening.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
So at one point, what inspired you to make the business more than a business and make it a ministry? When did that happen?
So that was about 2002. One day I had a driver walk in the door, and I was headed out to the East Coast to call in some customers. And he walked in. His name was Jerry. Still remember Jerry well. And he said, I was reading this book, and he said, I really sensed God tell me to give you this book. And it was a book called Loving Monday. And this book was about the author who got out of high school, went on to college, got a degree in aeronautical engineering, and his dad owned a really small business that produced heating oil heaters for homes and businesses. And he had bigger ideas. he wanted to go off, and he worked for McDonnell Douglas for a period of time. And then one day his dad called him and he said, "Son, I'd like you to join our business." And he was like, small business, is it really viable? Should I? I think I'd like to go to work with my dad. So he quit his job, ended up going to work with his dad, and suddenly, after a year, his dad dies. I think he was in his early 20s, and he was like, boy, oh boy, now what do I do? Do I shut this business down? He had also thought about going into a ministry at the time. And in the process, determined that God wanted him to make his business a ministry. They had a fire that almost destroyed their business. We had a fire.
Sounds like 2001 was your fire.
Well, that was a fire. Yeah, that was a different kind of fire.
You had a real fire.
Yeah, we had a real fire.
Okay.
Yeah, that almost took us out. And so it was. The driver told me, he said, "I think this guy's life parallels yours."
Yeah.
And it was really interesting because a lot of what had taken place with this guy happened to us. So I told Jerry, I said, "I'll take the book with me," and I flew to the East Coast, called on customers, and I was flying back into Chicago, and I finished that book about the time we were landing at Midway, and I finally understood what God wanted me to do. It was to make the business a ministry. And I'm like, okay, Lord, what does that look like? And so we one of the first things we started to do was tithing monthly, and it was really strange because our CFO, Bill Wetstein, would tell you that in those days when I came in and suggested that to him, he's like, where's that going to come from? And because we didn't have, we were struggling as a business. And I said, Bill, let's just start doing it, and let's see what comes out of this.
Yeah, and I think that's a really great thing to bring out, because that's the heart of the company, and like where you're going with this, turn it into a ministry. It's not just slapping on a trailer message, but the very heart of the business was, how can we be generous and give and support other organizations. So I wanted to touch on that. It wasn't just these graphics, but some of that. So you came to Bill and you said, hey, I think we should start giving monthly. And he said, let's do it.
Well, it's funny. Let's talk about that a second. My mother, bless her heart, my mom was a big giver. But she would wait till the end of the year, and she would see how much the company had made, and then she would tithe off of that. And what I was proposing was something different. We didn't know what we were going to have. We were trusting God to provide it. And so we began giving. We decided we were going to run the business on Christian principles, which that wasn't something new, but there was a few things that we were going to add to it. We wanted to hire for character. We didn't say that they had to be Christians. We just wanted to hire people for character rather than experience. We changed, realigned our mission, vision, and values, and we say we believe God owns this business, and we're just stewards of it, for a season.
Like the statement of faith. So not only like a mission statement of the company, but we have a statement of faith, and that's all part of the company now, and you're setting the standard for those core values, and all those things are happening.
Yep.
Okay.
So, our mission is to honor God through biblical stewardship, through generous giving and biblical stewardship. And then the last part, our visions, we're purpose-driven to create positive impact with everybody we come in contact with. And so it was a little unusual in the sense of a mission and a vision, but we felt like those aligned with where God wanted us to go.
And was that something that developed very naturally? Was that something, if there was no previous, was there a previous statement of faith or anything like that?
No, there was none of that before.
Okay.
It was a typical business mission vision. We strive to do the best to serve our customers, with honor and integrity or something like
Sure.
that. And it really didn't. They didn't align with God and His direction for where He would have wanted us to go. And we just decided that if it was a ministry, we needed to align with Him, not with what we were doing as a company.
Yes. So, and you say this is a ministry, but also it's still a for-profit company. So how does that work? Is that something that
I call us? I wouldn't say that everybody looks at. I call us a ministry that does trucking to support it.
Yeah.
And so, as we were working through that, we were continuing to ask God, okay, what else do you want us to do? And we're going to get to Brent's story here in a minute, but I'm going to bring some personal into that.
Please do.
I was struggling through, still trying to figure out, okay, Lord, why did you bring me back here? We can do all this, but we're still a unionized trucking company, and we've got all those legacy costs attached to that. Getting rid of a division didn't solve the problem, and so we needed to use our mission, vision, values to focus on Him. And I didn't realize it back then, but long enough so that He could realign the business with where He wanted it to go. And so I had a lot of baggage from my earlier years, growing up stuff, losing a father at a young age, not really
23.
Yeah, not really having a relationship with my dad like most fathers and sons ought to have. Mine was a business relationship, and I wanted to please my father, so I just learned how to work hard. And but not arguing. I enjoyed what I did. I enjoyed being around big trucks and big equipment, and I just loved physical labor. So I needed a lot of healing.
So there was some of that baggage you were bringing at that time, and you were having to work through that. And around that time, 2001 is when you first met Brent Hansen. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. So is that okay if we bring
by all means
Brent Hansen into this a little bit? Or the Celebrating the Faith and Family trailers, did that happen
later?
Okay. After. Yeah. Okay. So how did you two meet? And if I would also like to hear how you got into counseling and what that looks for you today, and how the Mariah Foundation got started. I would love to hear more about that.
Well, my wife was invited, I think, by one of my sisters at that particular time, and they were doing ministry at Mariah, and she'd go and she'd come home and she'd say, "Wow, I had great breakthrough tonight." Okay, well, what does that mean? And so she'd share, and she finally talked me into coming. And I'm laughing a little bit when I say this, but as I still remember walking out the first time that I went to Mariah, and she said, and she's just beaming, she's got this big smile on her face, and I could tell that, she really had a good night of ministry. And she said, "What do you think?" And I said, "Yeah, didn't do much for me." And, she could have, I think if she'd had a gun. No, I'm just kidding.
She wasn't happy about that.
But I responded in my unhealed, in a very, very unhealed way to her.
Yeah.
And I knew I had a lot of baggage. I just had to believe that there was hope. And a place, I had been to church all of my life. I had come to know Christ, but I really didn't know how to go about my own personal healing.
Yeah. not just believing it, saying I believe in Jesus, but what does Jesus do for my heart? Like, how does he change that? And it sounds like that's part of the ministry of the Moriah Foundation, is spiritual, helping people on their spiritual journey.
Mm-hmm.
So,
yeah.
Okay. So you came out of that, and then that was your first interaction with the Moriah Foundation. Okay.
But I kept coming back.
And you kept coming back. You said, I can't get, I didn't get enough of this.
Well, I kept coming back, because of my wife.
Uh-huh.
And she knew I needed to be there.
Mm-hmm.
Part of it was also when we were reorganizing the business. I remember coming down, it felt like a safe place to be.
Mm-hmm.
And so I remember a few times when I just came down and I said, can I just take one of your rooms and go in and pray?
Yeah.
Because I was so struggling with this whole shutdown of this division, and not knowing where we were to go next. And I'm like, Lord, I need some help. And it was the only place I felt.
Yeah.
It wasn't that home didn't feel like a safe place, but this ministry felt like a really safe place to be.
Yeah, when you don't know what life looks like, what the future is, where can I go?
Right.
Like, where will I run? And going to seek refuge in God and Christian fellowship. And so,
And Christian ministry.
Christian ministry.
Yeah.
Yeah. So tell me more about the Moriah Foundation. Is that,
I like what you said there with refuge, because I think it's been hard to define. I say this a little tongue-in-cheek, but I get asked a lot, what is the Moriah Foundation? And at times I'm like, I'm not quite sure. Here I was part of founding it and been doing it 27 years, and it continues to grow. And, I think organically speaking, it started as one thing primarily. It's over the years, it's morphed into other things. I mean, much like Nussbaum Trucking, right? There's just this internal change and growth that happens, and yet I think the core feature would be refuge.
Mm-hmm.
We want people to have a safe place where they can work through things and do it at their own pace. And we've been there, we have some longevity, so even people come back for seasons, they're gone, they come back again, they have other things, the layers as they're working through them, the onions as we talk about it, work through the onion layers. And if we can just be there and be available, have the doors open, and provide some services to help guide that direction. I mean, I think that's the core of what we're about. I did want to say something, though, about this time, having been there for a portion of it with Brent, and the transitions here.
Yeah, what was your perspective when this was going on?
Well, I think a lot of people, they don't necessarily see the leader's angst and what he's faced with or she's faced with and what they're struggling with. And I got the privilege to be there with Brent as he was wrestling with all of these very weighty decisions. And, we hear it a lot in Christian circles, hey, Jesus, what was the greatest commandment, right? And to love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. And there's another like it unto it that's no less important, to love others as you love yourself. And you see the real relationship in that. And so we're trying to grow in our relationship with Father God, we're trying to hear the Spirit, we're trying to learn from Jesus' words, and then ultimately that's supposed to flow through our life into loving other people.
I love what you're saying, flow through our lives into loving other people. Yeah.
And this is the heart of Brent Nussbaum. And this was his heart back then. Whether we have issues to work through in our life at the time, you kind of get the core of the character of the person, what's their desire. And I remember a particular moment. I was actually up at the Dells during this time.
Okay.
And our family did, I can't even remember whether it was, we would go in December, take the kids. We homeschooled our kids, so we had a lot of flexibility. We'd go when it was pretty cheap and there wasn't anybody there.
Take
it was
advantage
always
of that.
great. And we would get these nice deals. We would go there, and at one point it was really a pinnacle of decision making, and I would just use the word angst inside of Brent. Just he knew that the decisions he was going to make were going to affect a lot of lives.
Sure.
And it was breaking his heart. And that's the issue. What's the heart of the leader? And he called, and I stepped out, and I was just sitting in the stairwells at one of the theme parks up there. And we're talking on the phone, and he's just pouring his heart out. He wants to be the leader God wants him to be, and he wants to make the right decision. He wants to hear from God on this because it's going to affect so many people, and he doesn't want those people hurt or without jobs. And just hearing that from someone, you kind of know the character of the man. You know when you can hear his heart. And I just remember us praying together there, and I don't know how to run a trucking company. All I can do is listen. And he wasn't asking me to tell him what to do. There's no way I could do that. But I could be there to listen and to pray with him and support and agree together in Jesus' name that this would be the decision that God was directing. And so much in life, what more can you really do besides that, right? Because your heart, is for people, for God, wanting to do that, but the decision's so difficult.
It's weighty.
Boy, is it weighty.
Yeah.
Yep. So, I think that was early on when we got connected.
Yeah.
And I could just see his heart.
There was so much going on back then. Again, part of that is, you want to be there for people. You've got people that are upset because, they no longer have a job. You have the people that are still there that are looking at you going, I wonder how long the rest of the ship is going to be afloat.
Yeah.
And you have customers that you're calling them and you're telling them, we are a viable business. Bear with us. And in the meantime, you've sold off this other business that is the most profitable thing you had, and now people are just wondering, is there a sinking ship over there, or what is really going on?
And there's a lot of scrutiny that leadership can get, just because of the public part of it. I mean, you're leading a company, you're making decisions. Any decision you make, even if it's a neutral thing, there's someone that doesn't like that decision, and so that's also difficult. I kind of picture Brent Hansen in the corner, like you're fighting in the ring, and he's kind of like the coach. He's got the Gatorade bottle over here. He's like helping you out. That's just the way I picture it.
At least saying, hey, you can do it, and God's going to do it through you, right?
Yeah.
Encouraging
him.
Well, you can call somebody and get encouragement. They'll say, hey, don't give up, whatnot. I will say, and that's the one thing I've known about Brent and his friendship and his leadership of the ministry, is that when Brent prays for you, his prayers are powerful, and they're knocking through the enemy lines to really connect with God, and so I was able to, I was just blessed to be able to have. I don't know what I'd have done if I hadn't had him to call on. And yes, he never told me how to run the business or what to do next, but he brought me back. He brought me back to the battle line with the goal in hand: stay the course, and focus on focus on God, and let Him walk through that. And nobody ever really wants to walk through these things. I'm just being open and transparent. I went through a period of time when, with depression, because that was so weighty. But God brought me out the other side of it with some great people, Brent being at the top, and eventually, little by little, decision by decision, we found our path, and we just kept, just kept going forward.
Yeah, and I think it made me think that, like, Brent was there telling you, this isn't your story, this is God's story.
Right.
And God, this is more than just your course that you're fighting, but it's like, why are you doing this? What is our mission here? What am I doing? And it seems like that he's reminding you those values and purpose.
Yeah, and I knew very, very clearly that it wasn't, that I had no idea where to go with it. And again, we were a unionized business for several years yet, until we exited. The drivers actually voted them out, and that's a lot of details, a lot more to that, but God orchestrated that too. I could have never. Most companies don't. Once they're a unionized company, they're a unionized company pretty much for life. And again, that's just part of the story. So, again, going back to the whole ministry side of things, God had a plan, and we just needed to continue to walk it out. And we would go from one crisis to another crisis, but he'd always bring us through them. And I tell people it's kind of funny because in about 2009, actually it was 2008, that our drivers voted the Teamsters out. And so we had started another non-union company back in about 2004. And we ended up merging the two companies together into one. And then we thought, oh, this is a relief. Now we're one company, and we're one non-union company. And then 2009 came along, and the economy went off a cliff. And here we are. We're wondering if we're even going to be able to make it through 2009, because that year was really, really ugly.
Wow.
But yeah.
Yeah. Just when you think you get through it, there's something else there. I am curious to hear about, Brent Hansen, how you got into counseling, and then also the Mariah Foundation. How'd that kickstart? How'd you get into that?
Well, I think that ties into what Brent's saying here. Just time and experience lets you look back and see how God was there all the time and how he was moving things. You don't see it clearly when you're in the middle of it always, right? You're praying to see God's hand, and so you know what to do. But the reality is it's pretty dicey when you're going through all that time. But you get past it and you see his hand at work, and you begin to just reverence that idea that he is always there, he's always bringing us through, and it builds a lot of hope for the future, even though you may not know where you're at. And that's how it kind of ties in for me in my journey is I started out wanting a degree in biochemistry. So this whole counseling ministry thing,
Very different.
Very different. I mean, my aptitude test put minister on there when I was like, I don't know, 8th grade or something, and my parents were all excited, and I was like, there's no way. I don't, we had some bad church experiences and such, and so I'm like, I don't want to get in the middle of that. But about 2 weeks into my biochemistry degree, I realized I am not like the other people in this room. They're excited about measuring rocks and densities and all of these things that you have to do, and I'm like, I'm just not wired this way. And so I basically was right up to or after when you could drop out of classes. But that's where I'm similar with Brent. I'm like, God's probably calling me to something. I'm kind of fighting him a little bit on it, but he has a way to get you back around. And so I'm at that point where I'm saying, gosh, I'm lost. I really don't know what to do, Lord. And I remember a time sitting in the guidance counselor office. Everybody else had all done their ad drops, changes. If I remember right, I was the only one sitting in there. It was like all it was done. And I got called in. Nice older lady. She had been doing this for a long time. Little did I know that she was actually a follower of Jesus. And she just started asking questions, and I just told her, I said, I don't know what to do. And so she was very good at her guidance. And I said, well, I was kind of interested in a high school psychology class. I might do that.
Might pursue it.
So she goes, well, give me a minute. And she makes a call or whatever. And lo and behold, I end up with an interview with the head of the department there at the college. And long story short, he in essence tells me, I've never done this before. He goes, you're past the time, but I give a test every week. You're already 3 weeks behind. You have to make all that up. You get an automatic 10% off of any of those things, and you have to keep up with everything. If you're interested, I was desperate. So I'm like, okay, fine. Well, and I end up loving the psych class, and not that grades are everything, but I got an A in it because I loved it so much I could overcome all the obstacles that were put in there, which is a big thing if you love what you're doing, the loving Mondays, right? Huh. And he told me later, he said, I would have never done that, except he referenced the guidance counselor. And he said, we have had a good relationship all these years, and she said to me, Jim, there's something different about this guy. And I think it was the Holy Spirit that was at work in everybody to make that happen. And so God was still able to get me where I needed to be, and then of course got my psychology degree. Try to make a long story short here too, but I wanted to go to Florida. If I couldn't take my biochemistry into marine biology, I thought, well, maybe I'll go to graduate school there. So I applied to 4 Florida graduate schools and 1 Illinois school. And all of a sudden I started getting letters saying that I didn't get a review of my file because, a professor didn't get my letter of recommendation. And they're so competitive, there's just no leeway. Every door in Florida shut, and I thought, oh my goodness, what am I going to do?
What beach am I going to go to?
Yeah, exactly. I'm going to maybe be living on the beach, with this way this is going. You can't do much with a 4-year psychology degree, right? So ISU, Illinois State here.
Oh, really?
They accepted me, but I didn't get to choose from the programs that they had to offer because all the students had already jumped in and grabbed their spots that they were offered. So I had another obstacle put in front of me saying, you can apply again next year for like the clinical counseling programs, but you're just going to have to start in general. And if you're willing to do that, and ended up being a 3-year for a 2-year degree situation. And I won't go into all those details other than God ultimately led me through that and gave me these valuable experiences, even in what seemed like constant obstacles that you're going to have to get through. I mean, my relationships with Jim Nelson at the college, when I was a freshman, I mean, he poured into me, and he set me up for the next phase. And then what I experienced at grad school, and I just really learned a lot there. And then eventually, I got hired by Campion Barrow and Associates, Dr. Michael Campion here in Central Illinois, and I got actually hired my last year of school. So even though it was a 3rd year, he hired me during my internship there, and I actually had an income coming in, which was incredibly needy because both Kim and I were in school at the same time. And so God provided there, and then that led to some experience where Mike Campion poured his life into me as a licensed clinical psychologist, and some tragedy in his life happened that caused him to be laid up on the couch. And he's a very type A personality, business builder, etc. But he had to be slowed down during that time. And I sat by his couch, and he poured everything, his testing knowledge, his understanding of people, it was the most incredible year a person could ever ask for, to have that type of input. Which then ultimately set me up to be able to risk to help start Moriah. But God was there, even amidst a lot of struggles, obstacles, tragedies. He was always at work there. And a little time gives you the ability to look back and see that. your faith grows, your confidence in God grows. You know, He's there. Yeah.
Tell them about your connection to trucking while you were counseling over in Farmer City.
Oh, yeah, my goodness. Campion Barrow, Michael Campion in particular, he was running, I think it would be similar to like what used to be called an EAP type of deal, where if truckers are struggling, they can call. I probably don't have that acronym correct, but they would be able to call a counselor who was on call. And you know, sometimes truckers get into difficult situations at home. They're having an argument with a spouse, or we ran into situations with truckers where they became almost suicidal and they couldn't drive their truck and they needed to call somebody. And so Campion Barrow as a practice was working with, and it was Roberson Trucking at the time. And so I got the opportunity. I was the guy on call a lot of the times. And so middle of the night, whatever it would be, the pager goes off, you answer it, and there's a trucker that needs someone to talk to keep going because he's got anxiety. You know, you can have someone who's been to the battlefield and they still struggle with PTSD, and they're a trucker because that's been a good job for them coming back from military service, but something happens and the PTSD gets triggered out there. And so you're helping talk them down from the anxiety, you know. That was our role in all of that. And now Mike Campion, he was very connected with Roger Roberson there. I didn't have that level, but I had an occasion to be able to sit down when truckers were coming back there after they had they're in the process, I think, of building that new facility that's over there. And just to sit down and listen and talk with the type of guys that I've got on the phone. And it gave me real insight. I mean, that experience is invaluable, you know, to hear them and what they're struggling with. Because who am I? I'm a counselor on the phone, but I don't know what it's like to sit in a truck and have those types of struggles. So yeah, I had kind of forgotten all about that piece of the
You got
story.
an early start in trucking.
Yeah, I mean, it did give me a base of understanding for sure.
Yeah,
and
cool.
so that, you know, that's another piece that plays when Brent and I are talking. At least I'm not completely clueless, you know, about the experience.
Yeah.
So
That's cool.
A note on your school, you talked about going through that and a lot of closed doors, like obstacles there.
yeah, we sometimes pray these dangerous prayers, and I did pray, Lord, I don't know which school to go to, so close the door to everyone except where I'm supposed to go, but then find myself frustrated with God at the time because I really wanted to go to Florida.
Yeah.
And had a lot in my heart, just childhood vacations and a lot of good feelings connected to it. And then, I was getting ready to get married, and Kim and I talked about it at the time. Well, this is what was prayed for, right?
Yeah.
So, okay, Lord, we'll go with it. All right, what else am I going to do?
Yeah.
I don't mind Him making me desperate so that I'll take what's in front of me, because that's usually the best place to be. That's where He's at work, and He's kind of sanding us down, you know, to get us to a place where we can really receive what He has for us.
Yeah, making you broken and open to coming. Like when you first came to the Mariah Foundation, you weren't quite ready, but there needed to be some type of opening up of the heart to get the message through.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that was a kind of a segue into talking about how Mariah was born then.
Yeah.
Well, there was a couple that Kim and I were we were praying with. I guess step back just a second. There were materials that the Lord led me to use in private practice, and they were very helpful at the group level. And so us and the other couple thought, well, we'll go through it ourselves. I had been reading through, praying through the different chapters and materials, you know, dealing with forgiveness and, you know, just unresolved judgments of things and agreements you kind of make in your heart about things that lock you up. And and limit your freedom in your walk with the Lord. And so we did that as couples, and there was just a point where that couple thought, you know what, this would be really good to do in a broader basis. And in private practice, I was running up against the issue of people needing more time than just 45 minutes, according to the medical reimbursement models. A huge gap between churches and the private practice office, the counselor's office, because of the confidentiality laws. A lot of times churches will refer, and then the person comes to see me, and I'm with them 45 minutes. And then there's this huge gap. They're not really talking to anybody as a safety net for the rest of their week, and the two worlds didn't really combine. And there's some legal reasons for that, of course, but there's a service gap there. And so my heart began to be that I wanted to see skilled people helpers. We call them lay counselors, but bottom line is they've got the temperament and they have the spiritual gifts to support people. They're not going to be a licensed counselor, but there's plenty of licensed counselors out there. Okay, we need people that will be available the remainder of the week to help a person process what they've just done in the session, because again, that's where you're doing some of the most intense work. Well, I know that when I've gone through my healing journey, I still need to process, work it out, talk with somebody, because sometimes you walk out and you're left with this big thing. Now what do I do with it? And so part of Moriah was kind of a threefold aspect. One was provide some counseling, okay? And the second thing was train skilled people helpers who are gifted to know how they can step in and support people who are going through a more intense part of the season of their journey. And then finally, kind of this open public service that in the early days, I just talked about a lot of mental health related issues, depression, anxiety, those kinds of things. It's grown to talk about a lot of biblical issues now, even the difficulties of the times we live in. But in those early years, that was really the primary focus. And so we ran lay counselor development programs. They were kind of a year apprenticeship. You get kind of the classwork, and then you start doing co-facilitation of groups. You learn from a seasoned facilitator. And so I'd get up, I'd do the teaching portion, people would get in their breakout groups, there'd be a seasoned facilitator and a learning co-facilitator, and we just kept doing that for quite a few years. And then always a portion. It's absolutely fine. A portion takes that training, they go back to their local church, they use it there, and then a portion likes the idea of being under my license and continuing to do that at Moriah, and then that keeps us functioning there.
Okay.
Yeah. So.
Yeah, and so this was done in an effort. There's the phenomenon of people that come in, get counseling, and then they leave, and then maybe come back 6 months later or something like that.
There can be that, or even years later. I mean, I still have people all these years later that will contact me and say, hey, and we jokingly refer to it as a tune-up. Hey, I got something else that came up in my life. I need a tune-up, and we'll talk about that. Usually it's our desire is really to help people become their own psychologist, in the sense that I've been triggered, like maybe I'm in an argument with my spouse and the spouse says something and it just causes me to go to a 10, right? And it's like the person knows, whoa, where did that come from? Well, that's a great question. Let's actually look at where that came from.
Dig into it.
Yeah, because it didn't happen in a vacuum. It was connected very specifically to something. And if we can find out what that is, we can pray through that and resolve that, then we can keep these conflicts that happen in every relationship. We can keep them from just having the gas poured on them.
Yeah.
Right? And that's where more damage tends to happen. Our reaction to what takes place. And so that's a big part of what we try to train people to do is recognize your reaction, recognize where these things come from, and then even try to give people the skills in terms of how to invite Jesus into that and to pray it through and then get resolution of it. And if not, then we're there, to help where a person gets stuck. And Brent can comment. I think that's been a pretty effective model.
Yeah. I think too often in life, especially when it comes to forgiveness, something will come up and they'll go, and somebody will say, you just need to choose to forgive them. Well, that's fine, but until you're willing to really embrace, look back where that trigger came from, and truly invite Jesus into that healing, all you'll do is you're just masking it for a moment if you're trying to do it otherwise. And guess what? It surfaces again. And then you're like, well, I thought I forgave that person. Well, maybe some, but not, not completely.
Yeah.
And it's an ongoing process.
That's right.
It's not ongoing. Something, forgiveness is not something that you can do and it happens overnight. My own personal experience, and Brent's taught a class there called Choosing Forgiveness, is one of my favorite classes there. In my own life, I've gone back through that study at least 4 times, and every time, if I'm praying about it ahead of time, God reveals something that I thought was done, and you can tell whether it's done. If it's truly something you've forgiven somebody for, it doesn't trigger negative feelings. But it what will come up is you may feel empathy for that person, or you may find that you're able to love that person in a way that you hadn't known before. And so I think there's a lot of misinterpretation of what choosing forgiveness really is. And people are told to do it, but they don't realize that there's a healing process.
Yeah.
And it takes time.
You might say that forgiveness brings freedom.
Oh, you might be able to say that. Yeah. Yeah, I would just even encourage the listeners, and Brent has taught us this, to invite God into that. It's not just what we might think we need to forgive somebody for. Oftentimes, and most likely, God has something that he wants to continue to bring to us. And we might think, no, I've already taken care of that. But it's still there. It keeps coming back. And so I would just encourage people, if they have situations like that come up, hey, the reason why God's bringing those things up, he wants us to take a look at those things.
That's right.
And not tomorrow or next week. He wants us to do it now.
Yeah.
Stop what you're doing. Just invite him into it and say, Lord, that particular situation triggered something, and I've got maybe some hard feelings towards somebody. It could be a family member. It could be, who knows, a coworker. It could be just somebody you know. And as that comes up, just say, Lord, I invite you into that. I invite you into this wounding, because it hurts. It's painful. And I don't want to carry it. I want that to be yours. And I want to take it to the cross. So, I invite you into it. Just please work that through until there's just no residue left. And over time, it does come. And you'll find yourself with less baggage. You turn around and you go, wow, the bag's getting smaller. But then you can truly be who he's called you to be. Because, he wants us to be free to carry out his work. But when we're carrying our junk around, all that we can think about is our junk, right? So we don't make a very good witness for him when that happens.
Yeah. It's a slow process.
Yeah.
It sounds like it takes
Yeah.
time.
Well, it hinders your ability to be everything that God has, created and destined you to believe. I mean, if we really believe the Word of God, He says that we were found in Him and our works were prepared for us before the foundations of the world.
Mm-hmm.
So there's all of this He wants us to accomplish and to bless us and walk with us through. But yeah, when we, I use the analogy because of in my own forgiveness journey, it's like, there's supposed to be this power of the Holy Spirit, as Jesus defines as a river of living water rising within you. It's a powerful feeling, and He speaks it powerfully. And it's like, well, why does my life feel like it's a trickle? Well, there's boulders and logs and debris in the river, right? And you can say it's whatever, wrong agreements, wrong beliefs about who I am in Christ or about God, projecting a lot of earthly things onto God. All of those things start to create this blockage. And certainly, we've all heard the analogy of filters. And when we have that in our life, we're being stalled out in terms of accomplishing what God created us to do.
Mm-hmm.
And so, as Brent talks about dealing with personal issues along with dealing with the business issues, it's not actually a surprise in God's economy that as we're working through those personal things, it opens us up to see more clearly. We can hear Him more clearly. The power begins to flow in our life. That's ultimately, I think, what we all are kind of after.
Yep.
If our heart's full of bitterness, how can we really clearly hear God's voice, right? It muffles that. And so we talk about inner healing, and some people don't like that frame or whatever, but the bottom line is, if I want to hear God clearly, then I need to deal with the inside of the cup, and then the outside will flow as it should. So I encourage everybody, be on an inner healing journey, because your outer life will become more productive, blessed, enjoyable. It's important stuff.
Yeah.
Important stuff.
Really cool.
Yep, and you can invite Jesus into anything, anywhere. So for the guys that are out there on the road, it's a perfect time, especially if you get stirred up from a conversation that you had with somebody sitting there in your cab. All you got to do is say, Jesus, I invite you into this. I want you to speak to me about this. I don't know why I do this. And it's fine. God knows you don't know.
Yeah.
You're
Right.
just really admitting, reality there. And it's amazing how He will begin to speak to you. Obviously through God's Word, but through a truck that drives by. He works in mysterious ways, right?
He does. And I think I finally understand what loving Monday means, which is loving Monday, coming into work on a Monday, which we're recording this on a Monday, loving Monday, and taking the business and turning it into a ministry. And that's what you're talking about. Whatever you're doing, if you're driving a truck, you're at your desk listening to this, you're at the gym working out, how can you invite God in what you're doing? You can be in any business, doesn't have to be a trucking business, but
Very true.
Right.
loving Monday.
Yeah.
I love that.
Yes.
Yeah. And I want to just go back on something you said. You said turning a business into a ministry. When we do those things, we don't have to do the work. It becomes a ministry by what flows out of us to others. And that's the cool part about it. I think we go into things often thinking that, we've got to do this, we've got to do that, we've got to make this what it is. But if God is not in the middle of it, we can work all day long and it doesn't happen. Yeah. But when we were working on, as Brent commented, the inside of the cup, what flows out of the cup, again, it becomes what he wants it to become. And then we can sit back later on and we'll go, wow, this is so cool that it turned out like this, because we had a plan, but that plan wasn't his plan.
Yeah.
So it is kind of cool. Hence the next step in the ministry, right?
Yep.
Trailer graphics.
Trailer graphics.
Yeah.
Exactly. So you were having these conversations with each other, and at the same time, how did you go from faith and family, celebrating faith and family on the trailer graphics? How did those messages evolve?
Well, initially, Brent and I weren't talking about faith and family. I should have been asking him earlier. He's done so well with the others.
Yeah.
But we wanted to do something that I don't know. I can't say that God impressed it upon my heart one day in an overnight session, okay, or in a moment. We were, if we looked around as we were talking within our marketing group, we said, how do we honor God? It seems like families are falling apart, and there's divorce and there's estrangement from children, and how can we honor Him by encouraging people to stay together, encouraging people to be families. I mean, God ordained the family. So if He ordained the family, He must have thought it was really good, right? So we decided to, we came up with a slogan, celebrating faith and family since 1945, which 1945 is when we started. And we started all kinds of different, designing all kinds of different scenes. And they were photography, they were shot, some were, it's in material where they were shot, but there were some pretty cool scenes.
Yeah. Looking at the giant arch of the sky, looking at
there was
a telescope.
Arches out in Utah, looking up at the sky, and it's kind of in wonder at who God is and who our Maker is.
Yeah.
Another one, a family camping out in Colorado. Another, a family on horseback in Colorado. Another, father's out with his son teaching his daughter, or with his daughter, small daughter, teaching her how to ride a bike. A father with two sons out teaching, they're out fishing together. A husband and wife that are out for a walk in nature, just together. And we got so much feedback from the road. People like, oh man, it's so cool. But it promoted family activity, and we had changed our website around so that when people would come, it would, those images and messages would speak to them. And then got to that point where, I feel like God is, that we have done enough on faith and family, and that God is wanting us to do something else. And I had an impression that I should go to Brent and see if God was giving him anything. So from there, we ended up with Forgiveness Brings Freedom.
Okay. That was the first message that
Brent, yeah. So I'll let Brent talk about that.
Sure.
How that came about to him.
Yeah. Why forgiveness? Yeah.
Well, honestly, I think it hadn't been too long since we completed a Choosing Forgiveness class in terms of just timing. And so I'm sure that played a role. And yet, there's an interesting aspect here. Sometimes when the Lord, most of the time when the Lord does give me vision about something, I describe it as sitting on a surfboard in calm waters, but I see the ocean rising on the horizon, and it can take quite a while for that to actually bear fruit or the fruition of that. And I feel like this was a little bit early on. We were talking at a men's lunch about ideas, and I kind of put that out there, and I was thinking that your team, they were interested, but it didn't quite hit them right at that point. There was a conference later on that spoke to them about it. And so the idea and the thought and the phrase came to my mind during that time, and I put that out there. But it is a big transition to move from faith and family to, that's a rather bold statement to make and put on your trucks in a very angry world.
Yeah.
Right.
And so a lot of people are going to have to kind of come along with that, and the Lord would have to be at work, and obviously He was overtime.
Well, it's kind of, it's interesting that you brought that up, because Brent brought that up, and I brought it back to our marketing people at the time, and they just kind of looked at me. Yeah, I just didn't sense any real excitement about it. And then Brent's right. They went to a conference down in Tennessee, and it was put on. I forget what the organization was, but they interviewed a photographer, came out and did a TED Talk on stage, and he was a guy that had gone to Rwanda and Uganda, and he had done a project for a particular ministry over there. And the project was, he was taking photographs of child soldiers that had been kidnapped by Boko Haram, the big terrorist organization. They would take these kids out and they would turn them into child soldiers, and then make them go back into their own villages and kill their relatives and everybody that they knew. And if they didn't, they were taken out.
Yeah.
And so eventually these kids would escape from Boko Haram, and the United Nations soldiers would pick them up, and they would bring them to this ministry that was located in Rwanda and Uganda. Interestingly enough, it was for an organization that my son-in-law worked for. And they used art therapy and different means by which to reprogram these kids. And then they would take them to the villages where they had killed like relatives and friends and whatnot, and they would ask for forgiveness.
Wow.
And it was really, really impactful. And so in one particular situation, they showed, he did a picture of two young men. And the one was a child soldier, and they didn't trust these kids when they came back. You can only imagine, to the village. But two young men standing beside each other, embracing one another, and the one had killed the other one's brother. And it had to do with forgiveness. And both of them came back from that conference and they go, man, we're all bought in.
Let's do it.
They were all about it. And forgiveness brings freedom became a thing here. But the fun thing about that is we went back and hired that same photographer in Tennessee to shoot it.
No way.
Yeah.
Huh.
Yeah. And
that is something.
He ended up getting all the people from his church.
Yeah.
We got young and old and every ethnic group you can think of, and in that scene we wrote "Forgive" and "Freedom" on their arms, and they were all about this project. Every person that was in it. But this photographer did a talk. We were down there for it, and did a talk to all the people and explained what had taken place and why we were shooting it and whatnot, and they were all thrilled to be a part of the project. So that's how forgiveness brings. But what's funny, here we are deviating from the faith and family message.
Sure.
And I'm like, Lord, why are these guys not getting excited about this message? And God took care of it.
Yeah.
They go to a conference and the Lord just walks them through it, and they're back, and I don't have to do a thing other than say, hey.
Yeah.
So he did that.
That is something.
Yeah.
I love it, and we still get lots of comments today on that trailer.
Yeah.
And we get from the other trailers too, but from that trailer too. I mean, we get lots of comments.
Yeah.
It's much needed today, more than ever.
More than ever.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then the next one was in 2020, and we had COVID going on.
So you thought we should have another message, roll out another trailer?
We don't roll one out every year, but we've been more active with that. So the one that Brent first did was in 2018, and we got through that. And then the next one was in 2020, and of course there was all kinds of things coming out of that. If you want to kind of share a little bit more about where?
Is that the love above all?
Yeah, love
with
above
that?
all.
Well, I guess what I look at with all this is that we all have gifts differing, and we all play a role, and that's been the kind of the really awesome picture here is like, okay, so God gave me a phrase and planted the phrase, and then, Nussbaum Trucking is going to be the company that has the resources and has the ministry to actually put it out there. And then the Lord's putting other things in place by developing buy-in, and he knew all of that. He knew the conference was going to happen before he put the phrase in my mind, and this is the awesomeness of seeing God work through all of that, and that flows through each one of these. And so then the love above all was Brent had just reached out either with a phone call, email, or whatever it was, and he said, do you have any ideas floating around in your head? And I didn't at the moment, but I was driving actually around Bloomington Normal at the time, and I just said, okay, Lord, do you have something for them? Do you want to use me to give something else there, Because I didn't know if he would or not, but honestly, before I got around Bloomington Normal, that phrase just came out of nowhere. We call it an indelible impression. You try to explain it, but it was so strong in my mind. And I thought, wow, okay, love above all. I did not realize at the moment that was actually straight out of the scripture, right? And so I'm like, okay, well, Lord, here's what I'll do. I will just email Brent back or text or whatever I did at the time and say, I'm not saying it's from God. I don't know it is for sure, but it sure did come on strong and very quickly, which, like I said before, it sounds like I'm contradicting myself. Usually I see it way ahead of time. I was so surprised to get something that strong so quickly. And then you had confirmation of that later among the marketing team, which is once again the beauty of how that all works, right?
Yeah. They jumped all over that.
Yeah.
Well, again, one of the things, and we all know in COVID there was just a lot of, families that were just, it tore families apart. It really did. Tore friendships apart. And the idea was, how do we help people see above all of that?
Yeah.
And that was just a great message. At some point in time, I may even want to repurpose that with some different graphics. But
bring it back.
Yeah. But then we went on to do a few more. Well, our marketing team came back and said, you know what, we would love it if we could do a Psalms campaign. And so we began praying about it and came back. I said, well, give me some thought around that. And they came back with 3, and one was, God is my refuge and my strength. The heavens declare the glory of God, and the Lord is near the brokenhearted. And I said, well, where are we going to do the graphics? Because you just don't find graphics. And they ended up coming back, and they said there's this website we can go to that has these huge images that you can purchase.
No way.
And we can mount those on top of those images. And they ended up picking up 3 really, really cool. They're more mountainous type backgrounds. I think one of them is God is my refuge and my strength is more of a waterfall.
Yeah.
And the others are more mountainous in nature, but they provided the perfect backdrop.
Yeah.
And then there was yet one more.
Well, with those Psalms ones, the driver, I've talked to some of the drivers, those ones go the quickest. If they're in a lot picking up a trailer, they're like, okay, what am I gonna pick up next? And those go so quick. It's hard to find those Psalms ones, as that's what I've been told.
Yeah.
So they love them. So
yeah. No, it's been great to see drivers love it. You know, if they get out on the highway or if they're stopped for the night or whatever, the amount of people that come up and are just looking at the trailer. And the idea is that, one, they love the message, but two, it's speaking to them. It's speaking to their heart. It's comforting. It's soothing. God is just using those images to speak to people everywhere. And we've had such good feedback from people who have encountered them.
Yeah, for some really cool stories.
Yeah.
Yeah. So tell me about this next one. After the Psalms, there was another message that Brent Hansen, you helped come up with this next idea, another prompting. How'd that one turn out?
Phenomenal. I don't want to say it's the best one yet. It's one of my favorites.
It's great.
Yeah, it just is, because it so speaks to the times that we're in. Yeah, I reached out to Brent last fall and I said, "Would you pray and ask God if He's got what else He's got?"
Yeah.
You know, so I'm like, you know, if God did this well in the other two, you know, He can hit another one out of the park too. And so Brent came back, and I'll let him tell the story, but and said, "Hey," he goes, "I've come up with this one," and it was "There is hope in troubled times." And so I'll let Brent.
Yeah, we all would agree with this. I mean, God gets the glory for all of this from beginning to end. He's working out something in the process that ultimately means the ministry of a driver of another truck, a car, at a road stop, whatever it is, and they see that. It speaks to them, was a phrase used, and it ministers to them, right? So even going back to during the time of COVID, you just saw so much frustration and anger in the culture, and people not treating each other well, and pointing fingers and all of these things. Well, love above all that, right? Because if you can focus on that, then the way you treat somebody else is going to be very different, and it's all relational.
Right.
Forgiveness brings freedom, or the faith and family that started this off. It's all relational, and it's all ministering relationally to people. And so we get to the current campaign that Nussbaum's doing here. Brent either called me or texted me again. I had the afternoon off, and I decided to just, I was going to go work out in the backyard. And I remember walking out, three-season porch, walking across the yard, praying and saying, "Okay, Lord, please go ahead and give us what you might have here." And I got down on my hands and knees, not to pray old style or whatever, but probably cutting down landscaping, preparing for the fall, and I'm just talking to God. And that's my prayer life, is much like that. Just prayers, talking to God. And so I was just talking to Him, and that phrase came into my mind with an image, which is very close to the image that you guys have there. And I don't think my images are like, supernatural. They have to be the way I see it.
Yeah.
But in perception,
Yes.
very the same way with the light coming in through the window.
Yeah.
That what are we living in? Right now, people are looking around and say, what's going on in the world? Why do so many things seem unhinged and coming apart at the seams? And we're still having all these relational problems with people across a lot of different metrics. And people have a sense something's going on, and they don't know how to put their finger on it, but they're concerned. And I hear this more and more at gatherings I go to, people just concerned about the world, about the country. Well, ultimately, we've got a king that's coming back to set up his kingdom. And we can get our eyes past this moment and look to the bigger picture, that this plays a role in God's story. And I don't mean to be cheesy, as they say here. But he's speaking about that story through Nussbaum Trucking with these messages.
Right.
You know, there was a time where he had the message, forgiveness brings freedom, and then a time to think about love above all. And now is a time to look beyond the distress of today and to say there's hope. And it's not just even about God's government coming into the world and setting things straight. It's needing hope right now when people are having trouble financially and can't pay the bills and things seem so uncertain and there's rioting and protesting and all of these things that are happening. It unsettles us, right?
Right.
Well, we can have peace in the presence of God. There is hope in these troubled times. And so when that phrase came to me, I mean, it made total sense to me why that would be a fantastic message. But again, I just tell Brent what I'm hearing and what I'm sensing, and God provides that second witness in the process,
Yeah.
to lock it in, which is a great way to go about this.
Yep.
Yeah.
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 So it just that's probably one of my favorite messages, only because forgiveness brings freedom is still at the top, but this one, and love above all, is too, because I think for the time back in 2020 and even after, that message was really crucial to getting people to turn around and say, wait a minute, that isn't what is important. This is what is important. Loving one another even in spite of everything that's going on. And then turning around and saying, there's everybody, maybe not everybody, but most people, I'll bet, have had one of those moments where they sat down in a chair and looked out a window and said, wow, man, I'm kind of despairing right now over something. And just knowing that there is hope and that everything that God is doing is good. Maybe what we're seeing around us that's playing out isn't, but what God is doing is good, and that there is hope, and that there is restoration. It's really a message of focus your eyes in the right place, and looking out through that window. And again, God gave that to Brent, and the marketing company came back and gave us a kind of an image, and I said, oh, I think it can be cooler than that.
Yeah.
And so we went back to the photographer and said, this is really what we're thinking of. You got anything with high ceilings and in a big warehouse, something that doesn't look like something that gives you the idea that this person is somewhere where they've lost hope and they're searching. Where this will go, I don't know. For today, these are the messages. What God does with it tomorrow, I don't know.
Yeah.
I will just be thrilled if we don't get any interferences with our messages going forward. I think that's always a slight concern, but I think that God will see us through that too.
Definitely.
We want to see His kingdom I don't want to use the word elevated. That obviously would be one word, but we want to see His kingdom grow and His influence. And if this is a way that we can do it, whether it's using our ministry or Brent's, a combination of both, we just want to be open to what God has for us.
Absolutely. I love that history. I did not know about the forgiveness brings freedom part, that photographer and that story, coming the marketing team.
There's just 1,000 little stories.
Oh, I
like
bet.
It's
amazing.
just truly amazing. It's like, God, I could have never, ever, we could have never done that without you.
Yeah.
That's right.
Wow.
So that's cool.
History of the trailer graphics.
Yeah.
That's a pretty good history.
That's just past history. We don't know what
the future
has, but
Yeah.
but we're thrilled to be a part of what He has done to to today.
Yeah, wow. And it's cool to see how both of you, part of both of your stories, work together to make that happen.
That's right.
Quick side note with marketing and visuals, they say that visuals for a company that don't just promote their brand, but they have something else, do really well, because you're not always talking about your own company like Nussbaum, but you're talking about something else. People tune into that more than they would tune into someone that's always talking about themselves. So that's why that's not the reason why we do it, but that is a marketing thing that it helps out. It's a good tactic that people can use.
Yeah, the message is way, way bigger than the company.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Yeah.
So,
Great.
yep.
Well, any other thoughts before we wrap things up on this episode?
Well, I just think often about the guys and gals on the road, and that they're carrying these messages. And I don't want to speak out of turn at all.
No, not
I mean,
at
you're
all.
the CEO
No.
of the company.
No,
But
by all means, I think you're hitting they're carrying the message.
they are carrying the message, and I see that because I'm out on the road too. And we were even driving back from Ohio a couple years ago, and traffic was backed up on both sides due to, I think there was probably, some accident at some point. And there's a Nussbaum trucks with the messages there, and there's a lot of people that are driving very slowly. I mean, normally you get seconds, right?
Right.
And that's part of how do you get a message across in seconds. But here, all these people are seeing this message, and I'm thinking, you know what? In that case, it was a guy driving. I'm like, if that guy was not carrying that message, it would still be an idea sitting someplace, right? And the commitment here to make it come to life and put it on the truck.
Mm-hmm.
But I think each driver should understand that they're an integral part of God's plan with
Yes.
all of this. Whether they are recognizing it at the moment is that they're carrying that.
Mm-hmm.
That's the reason people are
powerful.
seeing it. Yeah. And so I look at that picture. I pray for the drivers as the Lord brings them to my mind. I think about this because they could take flack from some of these things. Not everybody's forgiving, and they may hate that message because they've got so much bitterness in their heart.
Yeah.
I don't want to hear it. They take some risks by doing that in one sense. So Lord, protect them, keep them, bless them for doing this. And it might have started with me on my knees, removing some landscaping for the winter, but it goes all the way through to that driver, right? And it takes each of those pieces, God weaving that together. And the drivers need to know how important it is, what they're doing in this process.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What's cool is, when we first started doing these, I was a little worried about our drivers and whether they would feel funny or just feel the pressure and the weight of pulling these messages down the road. And two things came out of that. One, God showed me that, I was the one with weak faith. And I had a driver tell me here not too long ago, he said, when I hook onto one of those trailers, he said, I feel like I need to shape up a little bit. So it was kind of funny that he said that, but I thought that was great. But he wasn't saying it in a way of, I better get it together. He felt the weight of that message. And he knew it was an important message to pull down the road. I will tell for everybody on this podcast, there are companies that spend thousands and thousands of dollars every month on marketing advertisement for just drivers. Today we spend no money at all on advertisement for drivers. I mean, not uncommon to spend 50, 60, 70, 80, thousand a month on just Google ads and whatnot to get truck drivers. But one, God brings these people to work for us.
Yeah.
And a lot of them are thrilled to do that because they want to pull a positive message down the road.
Yeah.
They want to pull
good.
and it's unbelievable when I go into orientation every week and meet the drivers, and they're there because they like the message,
For sure.
and it speaks to them.
Mm.
And so God is, thank you, Lord, for bringing all these
Yes.
great drivers to work at Nussbaum. We really greatly appreciate it.
Yeah.
But they are ministers
Yeah.
in their own way. They're pulling those messages
each
down the
other's.
road and answering questions at
Yeah.
truck stops
Absolutely.
or customers.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
yeah, it's
Wouldn't
pretty
that happen
cool.
without them?
Yeah,
It's a great
right.
message. Yeah.
yeah. We need him to keep this ministry going.
We do.
Right.
And that is incredible too, of how much we pay for marketing right now.
Right.
Pretty much nothing for getting people recruiting is pretty incredible.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that's great. Any other thoughts?
No, I'm just very honored to be a part of it. I feel very blessed because I believe that, and I've seen the fruit of what God has done
Yeah.
here, and all the people that He has brought to work at Nussbaum that are just awesome. I mean, I'm just blown away by the phenomenal people we have here. I'm blown away by the organizations like the Mariah Foundation that God has partnered us with, and for the sake of everybody out there, the Mariah Foundation is an organization
Yes.
that we support on a monthly basis. We just love being a partner with them.
Yeah.
So we love the messaging, and we're just looking forward to what God is going to continue to unfold here.
For someone wanting to get more involved with the Mariah Foundation, what would you tell them?
Well, just they could email us at info@themariahfoundation.com. Probably the best way.
Okay.
That'll get something in front of us.
Cool.
For sure, and we're honored. It's a blessing and a privilege to be any part of this whole thing. I don't even know why God gives me some of the phrases other than His goodness, but because it's just being invited into something so much bigger, and really love that. And
What's
seeing
broadening your message?
that. Yeah, I guess you could look at it that way.
Yeah, I mean, you've your message goes out in classes, it goes out online, but it's also going out on trailers, and he has used another medium to broaden your message, and I think that's what's really, really cool about it.
Yeah, there's a lot of truth to that, and just even further, like you talk about the partnership with God's kingdom and what He wants to get accomplished, and we get the privilege of being involved in that,
Right.
and have no idea whose life is going to be touched when they see that banner go by.
Yeah.
What it's going to, and how God's going to use that moment He already foresaw to speak healing into that person's life. I'm really looking forward to when He sets His kingdom up and we can sit down with Him and we can see all those people that we never even heard of,
Yeah,
but how that impacted them some way. That's a life of meaning
yeah.
and purpose. So it's a privilege for Mariah and myself to be a part of any of this.
Yeah.
That's cool.
Yeah, thanks very much.
Yeah.
Yeah, thanks, Dayton.
Yeah. Well, thank you to both of you for making this happen. This wouldn't happen if you didn't have the story to tell. And so I appreciate you opening up. And
Well, we wouldn't have had a story to tell if God hadn't unfolded that story
okay,
for us.
well, when you put it like that, and if that driver didn't give you that Loving Monday book,
Yeah.
and if
Yes.
that didn't
If-
happen,
yeah.
so
It's pretty cool.
a lot of things, and I keep telling Brent he needs to write a book because this is gold. I just love it.
Yeah.
Eat
This
it up.
man needs to write a book.
Okay, maybe you guys can do it
good.
Well,
together.
actually, he has written a book.
Oh, have
It's-
you?
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's pretty good.
What's it called?
Yep.
What is it called? It's been a while. Now you put me on the spot.
I'm sorry.
You can tell how invested I am. in it, doesn't it?
Yeah.
It was a long time
You
ago.
were made for more. Brad.
You were made for more. That's
Yeah.
right.
Okay.
But it's a book that talks about basically how to walk with God in dealing with these very issues that we're talking about.
Yeah.
Yeah. So,
Yeah.
so anyway, but I agree. I think it would be a fantastic book from a God-honoring CEO with a good heart for his people and wanting to serve God.
Yeah.
I think that book would be fantastic.
Yeah.
Yep. Be
Yeah.
a bestseller.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I really think it would be.
Yeah. I think so too.
Anyway.
Yeah. Well, thank you again for listeners. Thank you for tuning in. And
Yes.
until next time, stay purpose driven and own it every moment.
Hi, this is Lisa from Recruiting at Nussbaum, and I'd love to answer any questions you have about driving with us. Give us a call at 309-268-1199 or visit nussbaumjobs.com. Talk to you soon. You've been listening to Terminal Exchange, the official podcast of Nussbaum Transportation. If you're enjoying our content, please leave us a review. Your reviews help us spread the word about these important topics and invite more people into conversation. You can rate and review us on your podcast app or visit us online at terminalexchange.org. New episodes arrive every other Tuesday, so be sure to subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. You can also follow Nussbaum on your favorite social media platforms and be the first to know when new episodes are released. Thanks for listening. Until next time, own every moment and stay purpose-driven.